After today's 24-10 win over the Raiders, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski declined to name a starting quarterback for next week's game versus the 49ers. That comes from Adam Schefter after Shedeur Sanders is able to do what seems almost impossible. He becomes the first Browns quarterback to win his first start since the team moved back to Cleveland. So the question here, Caroline, which is crazy stat to give you, is who should we be talking the most about after what we saw yesterday in the Browns-Raiders game? Is it Shedeur? Is it Myles Garrett, who continues to be historic? Or is it the now fired offensive coordinator of the Raiders, Chip Kelly?
I think it should be Shedeur. I mean, look, did Shedeur have the most flawless outing? No. He was 11 of 20, 209 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. But I think we should talk about Shedeur because I saw potential. And last week, when we talked about what I wanted to see from Shedeur, I said I want to see him start to put the pieces together. I want to see him stop taking so many sacks because that was one of his big problems when he took over in relief of Dylan Gabriel. That was one of his big problems at Colorado. He only took one sack. And that's going up against Max Crosby. And I know that's not a great Raiders defense, but still, Max Crosby's going to get his. And he didn't against a quarterback that has a sack taking problem. So check for Shedeur there. I think we saw, the 3rd and 8. They're backed up in their own territory. And Shedeur Sanders rolled out, was able to beat the blitz, very calm, and completed a 52-yard pass to Isaiah Bond. I mean, look, check for Shedeur there, not freaking out when he was facing pressure and able to make a big play happen when it felt like the play was kind of dead to rights. Now, he was fine. Like, he wasn't outstanding. He wasn't amazing. I mean, there was an opportunity there that Jerry Jeudy just dropped away because Jerry Jeudy wanted to get cute with it and do his own Bambi impression. So that's another play that could have been a positive in the Shedeur Sanders column that we're just not really talking about. He was fine. He was not outstanding. He was not incredible. He was not amazing. He was not show stopping. I didn't need him to be incredible and show stopping. What he did show me was he's starting to put the pieces together. He's starting to show me that he does have potential in this league. So I think we need to be talking about Shedeur Sanders.
I think in some levels in this game, we need to be talking about Chip Kelly, who's obviously been fired by the Raiders. And Chip is ironically his first name because he decided it was okay to have a tight end Chip, Myles Garrett, several times in this game, which was just wild
So
strategy. The
dumb.
Raiders' offense is broken. So I want to say this about Shedeur, and I want to make sure that we have some context in this conversation because inevitably these things get cut off and people have a lot to say without listening to the entirety of what we're talking about. The hard part for me is that when we want to make a big sweeping statement about what we saw, we have to acknowledge who they played against. I had somebody that worked in the league for years call me last night and ask me, how did the Raiders get this bad? How is their defense this bad? And he said to me, I think they've got one player, Max Crosby, that should even be starting in the league. Everybody else shouldn't. And I say that because this is what we do. Like last week, I said the same thing when everybody said, what did we learn about the Cowboys? My answer on this show was, we didn't learn anything because they were playing the Raiders. And my answer today on Shedeur, as tough as this is for people to hear, is I don't think we really learned anything about Shedeur because he's playing the Raiders. Now, if he went out and had an abject disaster of a game, people would have hopped on it. And that's why I think it's a smart take that I saw somebody make on social media that yesterday was kind of a worst case scenario. Because if you're anti-Shedeur, then you got enough out of the way the game played where he did miss some opportunities downfield. And there were some times that he didn't read the field particularly well. You got enough if you're anti-Shedeur to stack onto that. If you're pro-Shedeur, you got enough to stack onto that. And all it did was make everybody more divided in what is a really nuanced conversation. I'm not rooting for or against Shedeur Sanders. I just want every player that comes into the NFL to have the opportunity to be successful. I just think what we want to do is make a huge sweeping statement out of this game. And Caroline, I think the real statement is we didn't learn much of anything. He had a couple of really nice plays that only Shedeur could make. And then he had some moments that were tough to watch. And that's probably part of the young progression of a quarterback. But I don't know that we saw anything in this that suddenly changes anybody. If you're pro Shedeur, you're still pro Shedeur. If you're anti Shedeur, you're still anti Shedeur. And if you're just trying to analyze what you saw, which is where I am, I'm looking at it saying, y'all, like, I'm sorry, it doesn't make for a great hot take, but the reality of it is we didn't really learn anything to me about the kid.
I think we did. I think that we learned that he is taking those steps. How big are those steps? That's the question. And I think this is, we all want definitive answers. If we see a massive, a huge day from a guy, it's like, okay, yep, it is so obvious to all of us that he's the guy moving forward. If you see just epic failure, then you're like, okay, that's easy to make my mind up. He's not the guy moving forward. It's a performance like we saw yesterday, to your point, that's kind of in the mucky middle, that you can make a case for or against this guy that makes Kevin Stefanski's job and the coach's job incredibly difficult. I will give Shedeur Sanders his flowers all day long because I think he deserves them after yesterday. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit. It's not like it was, an MVP caliber performance. Like, let's not get crazy here. But I think he had a good day. He had a nice day. And Deion Sanders was totally right for all of the celebrating that he was doing in the box.
Hell yeah.
But if I'm Kevin Stefanski and if I am the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, whenever Dillon Gabriel gets healthy, Dillon Gabriel's going back out there and he's going to be my starter. Now, Kevin Stefanski has not named a starter. I think he wants to, play this very patiently, and I don't blame him for that. But Dillon Gabriel is your starting quarterback. Like this, I'll approach this quarterback situation the same way that we do any other quarterback situation in the NFL. That when your starting quarterback gets healthy, your starting quarterback is your starting quarterback again. And you want your backup to come in and win you a couple of games and do his job. But when the starter comes back, the starter is the starter. I don't think that we need to make any sort of exceptions just because it's a very unique quarterback situation in Cleveland. I don't think that you give up on Dillon Gabriel all of a sudden because Shedeur Sanders is able to beat the Raiders. You know, if Shedeur Sanders was able to dominate against the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe it's a different story. But Shedeur came in, he did his job. Dillon Gabriel's the starter.
If I were Kevin Stefanski today, my hope is, and this sounds terrible the way I'm going to couch this, but I hope you'll understand what I'm saying. My hope is that we can keep Dillon Gabriel in concussion protocol for another week, honestly, because what that gives me the opportunity to do is get another piece of sample size information out of Shedeur against a 49ers team that's much better, right? Like 49ers defense is going to present much greater challenges, right? And so if I have the opportunity, what I would love if I'm Kevin Stefanski is to see what he looks like against a truly capable football team. I would argue, just for full context, I would argue right now no team, including the Tennessee Titans, is playing worse football than the Raiders. I've been a Raiders fan my entire life. This is truly the worst Raiders football team I've ever watched, and I watched them go through multiple 2-win seasons. This is a team that I think is one of the worst we've seen in modern NFL times. So I need to see Shedeur against a capable football team. So if I'm Stefanski, I would love a situation where I could just get another week. And if Shedeur goes in and plays really well against San Francisco, great. That's reason. Now I have enough stacked evidence to say, hey, we're gonna ride the hot hand. We're letting, just like running backs, sometimes one guy gets hot, one guy doesn't. Like, you ride the hot hand. You get that. Or if he goes in against 49ers and just struggles, now you get the really easy reason to take him off the field. The hardest part about this back and forth, and this goes all the way back to April and what we said when he was drafted on our Yahoo shows. The hardest part about this draft is when you draft a quarterback in the 3rd round and then a big-name quarterback in the 5th round, you've automatically created this situation where now, how do you give either of them the time that they really need to figure out if one of them can be great without suddenly going back and forth? And once you start rotating quarterbacks, that doesn't help Dillon. That doesn't help Shedeur. It doesn't help anybody. And that's the situation they're in. Like, to your point, if they stick with Shedeur, I think the message is we're giving up on Dillon for the rest of the year. And if they give up on Dillon, then the message really is we've decided he's not what we need and we're done with him. If they're ready to say that, great, do it. But if they're not, man, they haven't gotten enough proof from time on task with Dillon. They won't get enough time on task with Shedeur. And all that's happening is they're going to win just enough games that they won't be in a good proximity to actually get a quarterback next year should they decide they need one. This all is just lose, lose, lose for the Browns, even in a win. And it doesn't make me feel good to say that. That's not what I'm rooting for. It's just the way my logical brain stacks what we're seeing.
I think that's the correct take, because the only thing worse than not having a quarterback is having two, and you're not really sure what they are at this level. I know this is such a moot point at this point, and I've said it so many times until I'm blue in the face, but this is why you don't draft two quarterbacks in the same draft, because you find yourself in this kind of conundrum. It's a great problem to have when you have two great quarterbacks, when you have two quarterbacks that are so good you don't know which one should be the starter. It's a completely different situation when you have two quarterbacks that are young, that you're not sure are starters in this league, that you've seen some good from, which we've seen some good from both of these guys, and we've seen a whole lot of bad from both of these guys as well. So look, if Dylan Gabriel clears concussion protocol for next week, I know I would start Dylan Gabriel, but to your point, if we can get more of a sample size from Shedeur Sanders to realize, okay, what is he? Is he starting to piece things together? Is he starting to make some progress to being a starter in this league? Or was it just the Raiders? Is he actually, in fact, making strides, or was he able to capitalize against a bad team? But I don't think that you could hold Dylan Gabriel back just so you can get that sample size. I don't think that you can say Shedeur is going to be our starter and Dylan's going to be our backup, because that makes it's a confusing message to the locker room. That's a confusing message to the fan base. And that's a confusing message to both of those quarterbacks. The old adage is an adage for a reason, because it's true. If you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And you can't afford to stunt the development of either of these two guys if you do believe there is a possibility that one of these two can be your future.
This whole quarterback situation just reminds me of distracted cleaning. Like, it's a Saturday and you're cleaning your house and you're cleaning the kitchen. You're like, all right. And then halfway through, you get distracted and you're putting the mail away in this room. Now suddenly you're cleaning the dining room, but you never really finished the kitchen. And at the end of Saturday, you look around and you're like, I spent all day cleaning.
Nothing's
and I didn't
clean.
actually clean anything because I couldn't stay time on task, focused long enough to clean one thing all the way. That's what they're doing with the quarterbacks. Weird as it sounds. Quickly do want to say congratulations. We have all week to break down Myles Garrett. We will break down Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett, 3 sacks in this game. Absolutely electric day by him. Lost in the conversation about Shedeur was just seeing the joy on Myles Garrett's face, which was absolutely incredible. We will break down why he's the defensive player of the year, I should say. Got plenty of time to do that. In the meantime, speaking of big performances, what do we make of the performances we got this weekend from some of the best in the AFC? Because I'm telling you, I got trust issues.